Good afternoon. Well, it is raining, so as part of my Jefferson report, my Thomas Jefferson weather report, it's 59 degrees, it's raining, it's cloudy, it's somewhat windy, and so I'm going to have a sit and talk. It's still in daylight, but too wet to say. It's gorgeous. It's really very pleasant out here. You may hear some turkeys in the background. You may hear some rain. You may hear some wind. All of these are sound effects I'm generating to give you the impression that I'm outdoors when I'm really indoors. Uh, I think that I have this flight of fancy in part because I've listened, like perhaps some of you have, to the incessant speculation that is being treated as if it was intelligence when it seems to me it does nothing more than create concerns about the timeliness of the brutality and killing that will happen in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel. The, uh, the best example of it, I suppose, is that we hear the hosts saying, oh, Iran could have done this and might have done that and has been involved before, and they're very concerned about this thing. And um, I don't have any problem with people reporting actual proof, but it does seem to me that you have to be more careful. And carelessness is perhaps in the data points from 1948 to now, uh, may explain how we have the Hatfield and McCoys. I know it's hardly something like those characters that we point to, except for the fact that it's like a never-ending feud. And this is the problem with religious differences and discrimination and hate and perceived and actual uh, terrible responses that result in people being homeless and killed and compromised and lost and insecure and jobless, and we call it food insecure instead of hunger. So perhaps Iran does have something to answer for, but are we looking for a scapegoat? And that's what I wonder about the speculation we're having. We're so far from discussions about how, if at all, in addition to the waging of war between Hamas and Israel, can we ever get to a bargaining table to settle anything? Now, we have Netanyahu saying that the attacks that he's going to make on Hamas will reverberate for generations. What kind of talk is that? Now, is Hamas any better? No, of course not. They're talking about killing hostages. That means citizens they picked up and took away, and well, anyhow, what we have is an impasse, and the commentators don't help anything. You know, uh, they look for a scapegoat for, it seems to me, Israel's failure, and this is one thing we can say, to detect or anticipate this. But this is not the first time that there has been an attack like this in which people were caught flat footed. 9/11 is the most magnificent example, and there are others through history with different players. And there's talk now of did Hamas do this because Israel was making some advance with the Saudis? But that negotiation effort was not with Palestine or the Palestinians. It was with Saudis. In other words, we're trying to get a whole bunch of other nation states to agree, but we don't have a critical component of whatever would be peace at the table. Now, there's another reason why the Saudi explanation doesn't seem to fit. And the Saudi explanation that the talking heads are casting back and forth are that maybe Hamas did this to break up the agreement with the Saudis. Well, just like 9/11, there was a lot of advanced preparation for this thing to work. I mean, it had a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, a lot of different technologies working, and they were in and done. They were past walls. They came flying out of the air, literally. This was This took months or perhaps a lot longer than that, just like 9/11 took an extended period of time, and there were public examples of it happening. So this was going on for some time, and we got no human intel about it, not any of the intelligence services, not theirs, not ours, nobody. And but the other point is that they were doing this so long, it was before there appeared to be a break with the Saudis that would support some sort of peace in the Middle East. So what do you take away from this? What you take away from this, and you may have heard some of the military experts today saying this is kind of divided into three parts. But basically the breakdown was, how soon can we get past the immediate attacks back and forth to get to a middle ground where we start talking about how we have a peace? And it's hard to imagine us getting to that second part. That's the real problem. And people are attacking Biden, the Republicans. Well, that doesn't surprise us. They're attacking Biden for what is he doing? Well, he's moved ships to the Eastern Mediterranean. Does anybody have any idea what the power of these ships are? And we're not talking about Trump's disclosure in this case. So the notion of us standing behind our leader when he's dealing with a difficult military situation doesn't seem to trouble the Republicans. The Republicans are like gangs, just interested in chaos until they can be in control, and then by fear and punishment and coercion, they'll treat those that they would rule in any way they saw fit. And, well, who's the terrorist then? Okay, so those are some of my random thoughts about that subject. You may have heard that McCarthy has floated the balloon that if the Republican caucus couldn't figure out a speaker, he could be convinced to do it again. No, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. The fact that McCarthy kind of presented himself as somebody who's going to be better than No Jacket Jordan or Scalise. I mean, there are tough choices, because none of those choices can we feel are going to be constructive for the Congress and for the nation, and that's a sad statement. Now let's talk about what's going on the trail, the election trail. RFK Jr., who's already the subject of scorn by members of his own family, has decided, instead of the Republican going the Democratic primary against Biden, has now announced he's going independent. And it turns out there are polls that say the Republicans think that he would take votes from them in a general election, and so they're upset about it. So now they're putting out negative material about him. I don't know what happened to RFK Jr. My recollection of when he was the most forceful and constructive was when he had his concern about the environment. And he wrote a book. I've mentioned this before. I thought it was very well written. I actually read it a couple of times. So we got some birds out there. What I say roosters before turkeys out there who are enjoying the weather. So I just don't see how RFK Jr. is constructive here. Now, when they did ask Biden's people, one of his spokesperson, what he thought about it, is he just sent back an emoji with eyes upcast, downcast, whatever, suggesting that there wasn't anything to worry about. But, there are a couple of these states, the battleground states, the fight for the electoral vote, which is going to be a rehash in this election, no matter who the Republicans come up with, assuming that they don't get Trump. But even if they get Trump, certainly that's going to be what they do. So what do we have in America? What we have in America is we have kind of a political chaos on top of everything else. We can't trust people to do what they say they're going to do. If you enter a primary, basically what you're saying is that you would accept the result. and if you lose, then you would support the nominee. But that rule doesn't apply to RFK Jr. In many respects, he's more like a Trumpian than he's like a Democrat. And they talk about him having been a Democrat. Well, it's a long time. I don't know that he's ever been on a ballot before as a Democrat. Obviously, his dad and his uncle and the family members, they were steeped in Democratic politics, but RFK Jr., not so. It's kind of sad. We've seen people in these crises the last several years revealed for, I guess, who they were all along, but we just didn't observe it. I mean, in my own personal experience, I just didn't get the fact that Rudy Giuliani was such a menace as he turned out to be. But when you look back at the incidents through his life, then you get an insight into how he developed into the crazed figure that he is. And then it was the New York Times had a story about how he was being investigated for how serious was his drinking. And it's quite a depressing story about a man losing touch with humility, certainly, and reason and discipline, and the things that we saw in him as a young man when I was a young prosecutor with others who were young prosecutors. And one of those people, and we had offices right next to each other, Bob Costello. Bob, who was in AUSA when I was in AUSA, and we were both in the corruption unit after we'd been in other sections in the office. And he, over the years, felt beholden to Rudy, and he took on Rudy, and Rudy stiffed him when it came to his legal fees, and Bob has sued him for that. It's like he has all the worst characteristics of Trump. I mean, and he came upon them probably independently, not feeling responsible, not feeling loyal, not trying to honor commitments to other people. And that seems to be a rampant problem among our elected officials these days. But the headline, and the one thing that we have to consider, is how we have Hamas wants to kill hostages, and Netanyahu wants to attack in such a fashion that it will reverberate for generations to come. I guess that's a war cry. The real question here, the existential question for the Middle East existing and persisting, is what is the exit door from war to peace? Is there one? Can there be one? How will it come about? If you were to look across this expanse of time, as I said, from 1948 until now, you would not have a lot of hope. People have tried, advances have been made, but still the cancerous tissue grows beneath these efforts, and from time to time is so blisteringly obvious that it doesn't appear that there's any solution. We have to do better than that as humans. We just can't let this be the mark of who we are worldwide, that we are these hateful, warring, bloody animals. And I don't know that there's another way you can cast what's going on in the Middle East. The combination of religions at war, discrimination, hate, extreme pain and suffering, warlike strategies against humanity now suffered as if that's the way war is now. So I've wandered a little bit, and tomorrow perhaps I'll be on a dry trail. So until tomorrow, just imagine me spinning here in this chair, and I'll see you again. All the best. Bye-bye.